Hello, first grade. This video is for March 25th. Last math video I sent out, we talked about vertex, vertices, sides, triangles, rectangles, squares, circles, and you walked around your house looking for those shapes around you. Today we're going to introduce a new idea, and we're going to talk about angles. When two lines come together, you say they intersect. We already know that they make a vertex, that's right. And inside the space in between them we call the angle, and we measure how big that space is. Some angles are very small, like in this case, not much space in there. Some angles are very big, like this one's pretty wide open. So the word angle refers to how much space there is in between those lines where they intersect. Now, the most important thing for us to know in first grade is what a right angle is. A right angle is a special type of angle, and it's the type of angle that we see in squares and rectangles. So, you tell me, is that the type of angle? Is that the type of angle we see in the corner of a square or rectangle? No. Is that the type of angle we see in the corner of a square or rectangle? Nope. I'm going to do my best here to make it exact, okay? This is my best drawing of a right angle. Okay. And in a right angle, instead of drawing these little curved lines to show the angle, you'll often see them shown with a square to show you that they are a right angle. Now we need to talk about what a right angle is. So if we think about the angles as measuring how much of a circle that angle is showing, right? So in this case, it's just showing a little tiny bit of a circle. In this case, it's showing more of a circle, okay? A right angle shows 1/4 of that whole turn. So if you had a right angle there, another right angle there, another right angle there, and then the fourth right angle there, now you'll get that whole circle, that whole turn, okay? Another way to think of that, about what a right angle is if you took a straight line, that's not very straight, let me try again. If you took a straight line and you drew a line coming out of the middle of it, let's say I go like that, you're going to get two angles. You're going to get one right here and one right there. Do those look equal, those angles? No, they don't. This one is smaller and that one's bigger. Let me get you a little closer here. Now, if I try to draw that line coming out to make both angles exactly the same, I would have to go straight up, wouldn't I? Yep. That looks about as close as I can get to straight up. Now, if we were to measure how much space is there in between those two lines, and those two lines would get exactly the same. And that's one way to make sure you have a right angle. So I'm going to show it with the squares, okay? So a right angle is a special angle. It is the type of angle we see in rectangles and squares. When I draw a square, I have to make sure that those angles are right angles, okay? Of course, I can't draw it perfectly by hand, but I'm pretty close, right? Same thing with a rectangle. If it's a long, skinny rectangle, or if it's more of a shorter, fatter rectangle, these shapes always have right angles. Okay, I'm going to rate that right up there. Right angles. All right. And over on this side, we have angles that are not right angles, okay? That's not a right angle, that's not a right angle, that's not a right angle. Now, I told you the other day that this would help us understand the difference between a square and a rhombus. So let me just take a moment to explain what that is. A square and a rhombus both have four sides that are equal in length. Here's a square, those sides are the same length. Because if they weren't, if one side was longer and one side was shorter, we'd call it a rectangle, right? So a square has 4 sides that are the same length. A rhombus also does, but the difference in a rhombus is that the angles are not all right angles. Let me draw that bigger for you. So I've drawn that to have all those 4 sides be equal in length. Not exact, but as close as I can do it by hand. But if you look here, we've got 2 smaller angles, right? And then we have these 2 bigger angles. That's why it's not a square, because it does not have 4 right angles. Now, when we look at our square, we can see that those angles are all right angles. Sometimes in elementary school materials and first and second grade materials, you'll see these angles referred to as square corners. And that is a useful way to think about them because they are the types of corners we see on squares. I prefer to call them right angles because that's what you will call them for the rest of your mathematical life. Okay. The next thing I want you to do is take a piece of paper and a pencil and make this T-chart. On one side, I want you to write right angles, which we can think of as square corners, if that helps us remember that it's the type of angle we see in this corner of a square or a rectangle. And the other side of our T-chart will say not right angles. Now, we are going to take our T-chart around our house or around our yard and look for objects that have right angles. And we're going to look for, see if we can find a few that don't have, that have an angle that's not a right angle, okay? And I'm just going to draw in each one a little reminder to myself. I'm just going to draw that there to remind me that that's the type of angle I'm looking for over there. And over here, I might be looking for a really small angle or maybe one that's sort of wide open, okay? So any other type of angle that's not a right angle. I found a perfect example. This is a post holding up the stairs in my basement. And if you look here, I have an angle. Now, take a second and think to yourself, is that a right angle or not? That is not a right angle. That's smaller than a right angle. And if we look on the other side of the post, we have another angle. So think about whether or not that's a right angle. You're right, that is not a right angle. That's bigger than a right angle. So I'm going to go write those on my paper under the column not a right angle. Now, I only have to go a few inches here to find some right angles. Each board that comes down along with the next step forms a right angle. So I'm going to go write that under my right angles. I came back here and I wrote steps, and I put a little drawing there, which you could do if you'd like, under my right angles. And I came over here and I wrote post holding up the stairs under my not right angle. And then I drew a picture and I marked where those angles were to remind me of the angles that I was thinking about. Now, I was just walking through my kitchen and I noticed that on the outside edge of this door, I see an angle. And here's the angle in between those two lines. Think to yourself, is that a right angle or not a right angle? You're absolutely right. It's a right angle. So I'm going to go write that on my paper under right angle. I found another angle where the top of this window intersects with the top of that window. Think to yourself, is that a right angle or not a right angle? You're absolutely right. It is not a right angle because it's too big for a right angle. I'm going to go put that on my paper under not a right angle. Oh my gosh, so many right angles. Ah! So I came back and I wrote the edge of the door frame under my right angles. That's where we saw the right angle at the top of that door and window. And I drew that small table that had so many right angles. I also wrote top edge of the windows where we saw that angle that was bigger than 90 degrees. I'm sorry, bigger than a right angle, excuse me. Go ahead with your T-chart around your house, around your yard, wherever your family says it's okay for you to go, and write down at right angles and try to find some angles that are not right angles. Those will be harder to find. You will see right angles everywhere once you start looking. Okay, first grade, have fun with that, and I'll see you back with another math video in our geometry unit on Friday.